a small, bustling city, there was a young woman who lived a life many could relate to. Hard work, simple pleasures, and the constant desire for something more. Her name was Lily, and she worked as a waitress in a fancy restaurant downtown. The place was known for its high-end clientele, with wealthy guests who dined in elegance and at times arrogance. Lily's job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and for her that was enough to get by. Every day she slipped into her uniform, tied her apron, and got ready for another long shift. She moved quickly between tables, refilling drinks, delivering plates of food, and ensuring the guests were satisfied. Despite the daily grind, Lily had a secret, something she carried with her that no one at the restaurant knew. She had a love for music, a passion that ran deep in her heart. As a child, she had always been drawn to the piano, the way the keys seemed to come alive under her fingers. But life had never allowed her the chance to chase this dream. There had been no money for lessons, no time for practice, just survival. But every night after a long shift, when the restaurant was quiet and the world outside was still, Lily would go home and sit in front of an old, dusty piano that had been passed down in her family. The keys were worn, but they still made a sound that spoke to her heart. She'd play songs she remembered from childhood, or sometimes she'd make up her own melodies. For a few precious hours, she could forget about the struggles of her day and escape into the music that made her feel alive. Her love for music was something she kept hidden from most people, even her co-workers. They knew her as the quiet, hard-working waitress who always had a smile, even when she was exhausted. To them, Lily was just another face in the crowd. But in those late-night moments with only the sound of her piano filling the room, she felt like someone else, someone important. The restaurant where Lily worked was a place of wealth and luxury. The patrons were dressed in expensive suits and gowns, sipping fine wine and discussing business deals over gourmet meals. The air was filled with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft rustling of napkins. Most of the guests were polite enough, but there was an unspoken divide between the rich and the staff. The workers, like Lily, were there to serve, to make the night perfect for the guests, but they were invisible. They were part of the background, nothing more than figures in black uniforms. Lily had grown used to it. She had learned to keep her head down, to stay out of the way and to do her job well, but sometimes she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to be on the other side, to sit at one of those lavish tables wearing a beautiful dress, sipping wine, and being admired for something other than being a waitress. She often dreamed of performing on stage, of playing the piano in front of an audience who would appreciate her talent. But those dreams felt far away, like stars just out of reach. There was one customer who came into the restaurant often, an older man, impeccably dressed, with an air of confidence that demanded attention. He was the kind of person who seemed to have everything, wealth, power, and a reputation that preceded him. He was known for being a bit of a show-off, always making grand gestures and boasting about his accomplishments. His presence could fill a room, and he had a way of making everyone take notice. Lily had served him several times, always polite, always professional. He never paid much attention to her, of course. To him, she was just another waitress. One evening, the man arrived at the restaurant with a group of friends. As usual, he was the center of attention, laughing loudly and making everyone around him feel as though they were part of his world. Lily served his table as she did with every other, offering the best service she could, trying to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention to herself. But as she passed by, the man's voice suddenly cut through the noise of the restaurant. "Wait a minute," he called out, his sharp tone catching her off guard. Lily paused, feeling a wave of nervousness wash over her. "I've heard something interesting about you," he continued, a curious look in his eyes. "You used to be a piano prodigy, right? I remember hearing about you years ago." Lily blinked, surprised that he even knew her name, let alone remembered something from her past. She had never told anyone at the restaurant about her piano playing, about the dreams she had once had. She had kept all of that to herself, not wanting to appear foolish or out of place. But here was this wealthy man claiming to know something about her. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had long ago given up on the idea of playing the piano for anyone, let alone performing in front of strangers. The idea of being judged, of revealing her talent and having it ridiculed, terrified her. But at the same time, there was a small part of her that wondered if this might be her chance. Perhaps she could show the world, at least this small corner of it, that there was more to her than just being a waitress. The man smiled, sensing her hesitation. "How about it?" he said, a challenge in his voice. "Why don't you play something for us? I'm sure you're still as good as they say." Lily's first instinct was to refuse. She could feel the weight of the room's attention, the judgment that might follow, but something inside her stirred. Was this a sign? A chance to finally be seen for who she really was? With a deep breath, she looked at him and then at the rest of the guests who were now watching her, waiting for her to answer. I can't," she said softly, the words escaping her before she could stop them. She felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm not prepared. I haven't played in years." The man raised an eyebrow. "Are you afraid?" he teased. "Come on, it'll be fun. No one here will bite." Lily's hands clenched at her sides. She was terrified, but she couldn't back down now. She knew she had a choice. She could let this moment slip away, or she could face her fear and show them what she could do. Slowly, her resolve strengthened. She nodded, barely able to believe what she was doing. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll play." The man gave her an amused smile, pleased that she had agreed. "That's the spirit," he said. "Show us what you've got." Lily made her way to the piano, her legs feeling shaky beneath her. The room was silent now, every eye on her. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, but she tried to ignore it. She sat down at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and took one final deep breath. It was time. She began to play tentatively at first, but as the music filled the air, something inside her shifted. The nervousness melted away, replaced by something stronger, a sense of purpose. The melody flowed from her fingers, and for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. The people around her fell silent, their eyes fixed on the music. Even the rich man who had challenged her seemed captivated by what he was hearing. Lily lost herself in the music, her fears forgotten for a while. The piano, the notes, the rhythm, it was all that mattered. After that evening, Lily couldn't stop thinking about what had happened at the restaurant. The moment she had agreed to play the piano in front of those wealthy guests, her life had shifted in a way she didn't fully understand yet. She kept replaying the scene in her mind, the way the man had challenged her, the silence that fell over the room as she approached the piano, and the feeling of her fingers touching the keys after so many years. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. She had never imagined that such a simple invitation, or rather a challenge, could stir so many emotions inside her. The next morning, Lily woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight spilled through her small apartment window, and she could hear the distant sounds of the city coming to life. She made herself a cup of coffee, sat by the table, and thought about the piano. Her heart still raced as she remembered the faces of the restaurant guests, their curiosity, their skepticism, and most importantly, their surprise. She had always known she loved music, but she realized that she had never really given herself the chance to share it with others. The memory of that silence in the restaurant felt like a spark, a sign that maybe she could do more than she had ever allowed herself to imagine. That morning at work, Lily moved through her routine with a new sense of awareness. She served breakfast and coffee to the early guests, refilled drinks, and smiled as she carried plates of food to tables. But her mind wandered constantly back to the piano and the night before. She remembered the surprised look on the wealthy man's face when she had agreed to play. She remembered the way he had leaned back, expecting to be entertained only to find himself confronted by something real and heartfelt. She had felt proud, even if it had been scary, and that feeling stayed with her. Over the next few days, something strange began to happen. The wealthy man who had issued the challenge returned to the restaurant, and this time he didn't just come with friends. He seemed to be watching her more closely. He would smile knowingly as she walked by his table and occasionally say things that made the other guests laugh. Lily noticed the subtle attention but chose to stay professional. She served him like she did any other guest, with a polite smile and efficient service. Still, she couldn't ignore the way her heart picked up speed whenever he looked her way. There was curiosity in his eyes, and that made her feel both nervous and excited. Then one evening, as the restaurant began to fill with dinner guests, something unexpected happened. The man called her over to his table, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Lily," he said, "I want you to do something for me tonight." His voice was smooth, confident, and commanding, and Lily felt a knot form in her stomach. "I want you to play the piano again. Don't worry about the audience, just play. Let them hear what you can do. Lily hesitated. The memory of the first performance was still fresh, and she felt the familiar rush of fear. She wasn't sure if she was ready to do it again so soon, but something inside her stirred. She thought about her childhood, the times she had practiced in secret, the hours she had spent dreaming of this very moment. Maybe this was her chance to prove to herself that she could rise above fear and doubt. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said quietly, her voice stronger than she felt. That night, the restaurant was buzzing. The rich guests laughed, clinked glasses, and moved through the dining room, unaware that something extraordinary was about to happen. Lily approached the piano, feeling the familiar nerves but also a growing excitement. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the worn texture beneath her touch. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, but as she continued, the music began to flow more naturally. She played with her heart, letting her emotions guide her, and soon the room began to change. The guests, who had been talking and moving about just moments before, started to notice the music. Conversation slowed and heads turned toward the piano. Lily didn't look up. She focused entirely on the notes, on the melody, on the feeling of the music moving through her. The first few chords captured their attention, but as she continued, the music grew stronger, more confident and impossible to ignore. Even the wealthy man who had challenged her leaned forward in his seat, eyes wide, clearly impressed by the talent he had underestimated. As she played, Lily began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. The piano allowed her to forget about the world outside, about the wealth and judgment of the guests, and even about her own fears. She was lost in the rhythm and melody, completely immersed in the moment. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was her story, her struggle, her dreams, and her hope. Each chord was a word, each melody a sentence, and together they spoke of something powerful and undeniable. By the time she finished the piece, the restaurant was silent. The last note hung in the air, and for a moment no one moved. Then slowly the applause began, quiet at first, then growing louder and more enthusiastic. Some guests were on their feet, clapping and cheering. Others whispered to each other, clearly moved by what they had just heard. The wealthy man's usual confident smirk was gone, replaced by a look of genuine surprise and respect. He had expected a simple performance, maybe even a poor one, but what he saw was talent, heart, and courage. That night changed something inside Lily. She realized that she could no longer hide her passion or downplay her abilities. She had spent years believing that her dreams were out of reach, that her life was defined by her job as a waitress. But the response of the crowd, the way they had listened and the way they had reacted, it told her something important. She had the power to touch people, to move them, to make them feel something real just through her music. Over the next few weeks, Lily noticed subtle changes in the restaurant. More guests began to ask about her, curious if she played the piano professionally. The wealthy man returned often, sometimes just to watch her work, sometimes to see if she would play again. But the most important change was in herself. She felt stronger, more confident, and more willing to take risks. She began to practice more often, even when she was tired from work. The piano became a sanctuary, a place where she could grow and explore her talent without fear. Her co-workers noticed the change too. Lily, who had once been quiet and reserved, now carried herself with a quiet confidence. She smiled more freely, spoke with more energy, and seemed to have a spark that had been missing before. They didn't know exactly what had changed, but they could feel it, and it made them curious. Some asked her if she had taken lessons or if she had performed somewhere before. Lily simply smiled and nodded, not yet ready to share everything, but feeling proud of what she had achieved. Lily also began to dream again. Not just in the small, quiet moments at home, but openly and boldly. She imagined performing on bigger stages, sharing her music with more people, and perhaps even building a life where her passion could support her. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced it, and she had found that her courage was stronger than she had ever imagined, and so life went on. Lily continued her work at the restaurant, serving the wealthy guests with the same dedication as before. But now there was a new energy in her life, a sense of possibility that had been missing. She knew that one night, one simple challenge had opened a door, It had reminded her that talent, courage, and heart could change everything. And although she didn't yet know where this path would lead, she felt ready to follow it step by step, note by note, into a future full of music, hope, and unexpected opportunities. The days after Lily's second performance passed in a blur of routine and reflection. She went to work, served tables, and moved gracefully through the crowded restaurant, but her mind was always partly elsewhere. Each time she walked past the piano in the corner of the dining room, she felt a familiar pull, a magnetic draw that reminded her of how alive she had felt when her fingers had touched the keys. The memory of the audience's reaction lingered in her thoughts. The silence, the surprise, the applause. It was a feeling she had longed for all her life, a confirmation that her music could speak to people, even those who seemed worlds apart from her own life. That week, the wealthy man who had first challenged her returned again. This time he arrived alone, a curious look on his face and a hint of something unspoken in his eyes. Lily noticed him immediately, feeling a flicker of nerves but also a strange sense of anticipation. Perhaps he was going to challenge her again, or perhaps he had something else in mind. She had no idea, but she knew that whatever happened next could change the course of her life. As the evening progressed, the restaurant filled with its usual crowd of wealthy guests. They laughed, conversed in low, polite tones, and sipped their drinks. Lily moved between the tables, serving food, refilling glasses, and ensuring that each guest felt attended to. She had grown accustomed to this world of wealth and elegance, but she had never let herself feel part of it. She was always aware of the divide, the invisible line that separated the patrons from those who served them. Yet every now and then, something would make her feel that the gap could be bridged, that perhaps talent and heart could reach across even the most rigid barriers. It was during one of these evenings that the man called her over to his table again. "Lily," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "I've been thinking about your performance. You have something special, something that doesn't come along often. I want you to play tonight. No excuses. Show everyone what you can do." His tone carried no hint of mockery this time. It was serious, almost encouraging, and Lily could sense the weight of his attention. Her heart pounded. She had not expected him to push her like this, and yet a part of her felt ready. She had practiced in the quiet of her apartment every night since the last performance. She had worked through her nerves, rehearsed the pieces she loved, and even tried composing a few short melodies of her own. Slowly she nodded, and a small smile formed on her face. "All right," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll play." The dining room grew quieter as she walked toward the piano. There was something different about this time. She wasn't just nervous. She was determined. Her fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the coldness that had warmed under her touch over countless hours of practice. She closed her eyes for a moment and let herself breathe. She thought about the music she loved, the melodies that had always made her heart soar, and the stories she wanted to tell. Then slowly she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, testing the waters, but soon they grew stronger, more confident. Lily poured her feelings into the music, letting her joy, her fear, her hope, and her dreams flow through each chord. She had never felt so alive. The guests, who had been murmuring and chatting a few moments earlier, fell silent. Every ear in the room seemed to tune in, drawn by the purity and intensity of her playing. Even the wealthy man leaned forward, his expression unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a deep interest, a recognition of talent he had perhaps underestimated. As the performance continued, Lily began to lose herself in the music. Her nerves faded completely, replaced by a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a waitress in a crowded restaurant. She was a musician, telling a story through the keys, reaching out to the audience with each note. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others whispered to each other, astonished at the skill and emotion in her playing. Lily noticed none of this. She was too immersed in her own world, a world where music was everything. The piece she chose was complex, a combination of classical influence and her own improvisation. Each hand moved independently, but together they created harmony, melody, and rhythm that captivated everyone present. The subtle shifts in tempo, the delicate pauses, the crescendos and diminuendos, all of it revealed her depth as a musician and her understanding of the language of emotion. She realized that music wasn't just about skill. It was about connection, about speaking to the hearts of people who might not even know what they were feeling until they heard it reflected back to them in sound. When she finished, the restaurant was silent for a long moment. The last note seemed to linger, hanging in the air like a gentle question. Then gradually the applause began. At first, a few polite claps, then more, growing louder and louder until the room was filled with the sound of genuine appreciation. Some guests were on their feet, cheering and clapping with unrestrained excitement. The wealthy man who had brought this challenge to her finally stood, his usual confident demeanor softened by awe and respect. For Lily, the applause was not just validation from the audience. It was a confirmation of herself. Every long day of work, every hour spent practicing alone, every fear she had confronted, all of it had led to this moment. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She realized that she had the power to impact people with her art, to move them and to make them feel something real. It was a feeling unlike anything she had ever experienced, and it filled her with an energy she hadn't known she possessed. After the performance, the wealthy man approached her, a new respect in his eyes. "That was incredible," he said simply. "I underestimated you. You have a gift, and I think it deserves to be shared beyond this restaurant." His words surprised her, not because they were praise, but because they carried a genuine understanding of what she had done. He wasn't patronizing or condescending. He had listened, really listened, and recognized the talent she had worked so hard to nurture in private. Lily smiled, unsure what to say. Her mind raced with possibilities, but also with caution. She had learned to be careful, to protect herself from disappointment and judgment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It means a lot to hear that." She didn't reveal all her thoughts or ambitions yet. She wanted to savor this moment, to feel proud of herself without the weight of expectation. The following days were different. Guests began to ask about her, wondering if she performed elsewhere or if she planned to. Some left generous tips with encouraging notes telling her she had a rare talent. Her co-workers noticed her change too. Lily, once quiet and reserved, now carried herself with a new confidence. She smiled more freely, moved more gracefully, and seemed to carry a spark that hadn't been there before. Even the restaurant manager, who had always seen her as dependable but ordinary, began to pay attention, curious about this transformation. Lily continued to work her shifts, but now the piano became a regular part of her evenings. She played not just when asked, but also when she could, letting the music guide her. She experimented with new melodies, revisited old favorites, and even began composing short pieces of her own. Each night, as the restaurant buzzed around her, she found moments of escape, moments of joy, and moments of self-discovery. Music was no longer just a hobby or a secret. It had become a lifeline, a bridge between her dreams and the life she was living. In the quiet moments after her performances, Lily often reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the shy girl who had once played in an empty living room, afraid to show her talent. Now she stood before an audience, commanding attention not through wealth or status, but through skill, passion, and courage. She realized that life had given her an opportunity, a test of bravery, and she had answered it. That answer had changed her, giving her a new sense of purpose and a renewed belief in herself. And so, Lily's journey continued. Each night at the restaurant, each performance at the piano, each smile and nod from the audience added layers to her confidence and skill. She was no longer just a waitress serving food. She was an artist, a storyteller, and a woman discovering the power she had always carried within her. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Lily felt ready to follow it note by note, step by step, into a future full of music, possibility, and hope. That evening, the restaurant was alive with its usual energy, clinking glasses, quiet conversations, and the faint scent of fresh food in the air. Yet beneath that everyday bustle, a different kind of anticipation hung in the room. Word had spread among the staff that Lily would play the piano again. Guests who had visited before whispered to each other, wondering what they would hear this time. Some had heard of her talent, some had seen her perform, but all were curious. Even the wealthy man who had first challenged her seemed unusually attentive, quietly watching as she moved through the room, preparing for the moment that would soon come. Lily felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she approached the piano. She had played many times now, but each performance brought its own set of fears. What if she stumbled? What if the guests didn't enjoy it? The last time had been met with surprise and applause, but the memory of that expectation weighed on her. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling their familiar texture, and closed her eyes for a moment. She reminded herself that this was her music, her expression, and that she had the power to shape the moment. Taking a deep breath, she let her fingers find the melody, and slowly, the first notes filled the air. The initial sound was soft, almost tentative, but it carried a clarity that immediately drew the attention of the guests. Conversations ceased and heads turned toward the piano. Lily played with feeling, letting her emotions guide each movement, each chord. She had practiced tirelessly in the quiet of her apartment, but now she poured not just skill, but heart into her music. The audience, a room full of people accustomed to luxury and spectacle, found themselves caught off guard by the sincerity of her playing. There was no flash, no grand gesture, just raw, moving talent. As she continued, Lily began to feel the music lift her, to transport her beyond the confines of the restaurant and the expectations of the guests. Her nerves faded, replaced by a flowing confidence. She was no longer the waitress walking between tables. She was a musician telling her story. Each note she played seemed to speak directly to the listeners, touching something inside them that words could not reach. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Others leaned forward, captivated by the harmony and the emotion that radiated from her performance. The wealthy man who had first challenged her watched silently, his usual air of superiority replaced with quiet admiration. He had expected something entertaining at most, a polite display that would amuse his guests. Instead, he found himself drawn in, moved by Lily's artistry and humbled by the courage she displayed with each chord. His friends whispered among themselves, noticing how captivated he was, and slowly, they too began to pay full attention. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. The casual elegance and wealth that usually dominated the space had been replaced by something more genuine, more human. Music had taken over. As Lily's performance progressed, she added subtle improvisations, expressing herself freely. She played pieces she had composed, blending melody and emotion, weaving together stories of her own life. She remembered the long nights spent practicing in her small apartment, the frustration when she made mistakes, the quiet moments of joy when she finally got a passage right. All of that had led to this moment. Now, the restaurant, full of strangers, felt like an extension of that private world, a place where her music could be shared, felt, and understood. The reactions of the audience were immediate and intense. The guests who had initially been skeptical, those who had come expecting polite entertainment, now sat completely absorbed. Some whispered, astonished at her skill. Others nodded in silent approval, moved by the depth of feeling in her playing. A few of the regular patrons who had seen wealth as a form of power seemed to realize that there was something far more compelling than money in that room. Talent, courage, and heart had captured their attention, and they were powerless to resist it. When Lily reached the crescendo of her piece, the room held its breath. The final notes rang out, lingering in the air like a delicate echo. For a long moment, there was complete silence. Then slowly, applause began to ripple through the restaurant. It started with a few polite claps, then grew steadily, until the entire room was clapping and cheering. Some guests stood clapping with excitement and amazement. Lily felt her heart swell, not with pride alone, but with the knowledge that she had reached people in a way that went beyond appearances, wealth, or status. She had touched them with something real. The wealthy man finally stood, his hands clapping, his expression transformed. He approached her quietly, his tone sincere. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "You have a gift. Not many people can move a room like that. I am genuinely impressed." His words were different this time. They were not a challenge, a tease, or a display of dominance. They were acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps even a hint of admiration. Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. For years she had hidden her talent, doubted herself, and kept her dreams locked away. Now someone had seen her for who she really was. The other guests were still talking about the performance. Some came forward to compliment her, offering kind words and gestures that made her feel valued in a way she had rarely experienced. Tips left on the tables were generous, accompanied by short notes praising her talent. For Lily, this was more than recognition. It was a signal that her dreams were not impossible. Her music could matter, could reach people, could create moments of shared humanity even in a room accustomed to wealth and luxury. Back in the kitchen, her co-workers watched quietly. They had always known Lily was special, but seeing her perform, watching her command the attention of the entire restaurant was a revelation. Some exchanged whispers, surprised by the transformation. Others felt inspired, realizing that even in ordinary lives, extraordinary talent could exist. Lily herself was quietly proud but also grounded. She knew that talent alone was not enough. Courage, practice, and dedication were just as important. The applause outside was gratifying, but what mattered most was the connection she had made through her music. After the performance, Lily returned to her station, slightly breathless but composed. She smiled politely at the guests who continued to compliment her, accepting their words with gratitude. She felt different, as if a layer of doubt had been lifted from her shoulders. She had faced her fears twice now, and discovered that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. For the first time, she felt a sense of control over her own path, a confidence that her life could hold possibilities beyond her current reality. That night, when the restaurant emptied and Lily finally sat alone at the piano, she reflected on the evening. The room was quiet now, the echoes of applause fading into memory, but the feeling remained. She had shared a part of herself with the world, and the response had been genuine and profound. She realized that music was not just something she loved to do in private. It was her voice, her way of communicating, her bridge to others. The piano had always been a friend, but now it was also a stage for her courage. Over the following days, word about Lily's performances spread. Guests returned, hoping to hear her play again. Some were regulars who had witnessed her talent firsthand, while others were new, drawn by curiosity and the excitement of discovering someone remarkable. Lily remained humble, continuing her work as a waitress while embracing the chance to perform whenever she could. Each note she played reminded her of the strength she had found within herself, the power of persistence, and the beauty of sharing her passion with others. And as the nights continued, Lily began to notice a change not just in the restaurant or the guests, but in herself. She walked taller, smiled more openly, and approached her work with renewed energy. She had faced fear, embraced opportunity, and transformed doubt into courage. Music had become more than a private refuge. It was now a part of her identity, a guiding force and a testament to what could happen when talent, heart, and determination intersected. She understood more than ever that her journey was just beginning, and the path ahead was full of promise, waiting for her to explore it note by note. After weeks of performing at the restaurant, Lily began to notice how much had changed in her life. It wasn't just the attention from the guests or the admiration from the wealthy man who had first challenged her. It was something deeper. She had discovered a part of herself she had long forgotten: courage, confidence, and a belief that her dreams mattered. Every note she played on the piano reminded her of this newfound strength, and each performance was a chance to connect with people in a way that went far beyond wealth, status, or appearances. The restaurant had become more than a place of work. It was now a stage, a testing ground where Lily could explore her abilities and push herself further. She continued serving tables, moving gracefully through the busy dining room, but now there was a spark in her steps, a quiet pride in the way she carried herself. Her co-workers noticed the change as well. They had always respected her for her hard work, but now they saw something else, someone who had found her voice, her courage, and her place in the world. Word about Lily's talent spread even further. Guests began to come specifically to hear her play. Some were returning patrons eager to experience the music again. Others had heard about her from friends or had read about her online. The restaurant became a destination not just for its fine dining, but for the extraordinary piano performances that Lily gave. She was no longer invisible, no longer just another waitress moving through a room of strangers. She had become someone people remembered, someone whose presence could captivate a room. Despite the growing recognition, Lily remained grounded. She loved the piano, yes, but she also valued the work she did at the restaurant, serving tables, interacting with guests, and navigating the busy, noisy environment kept her connected to reality. She had learned that fame or attention was fleeting, but the joy of creating music and sharing it with others was lasting. Each night when she sat at the piano, she played for herself and for those who truly wanted to listen. She poured her heart into every note, letting the music tell her story, her struggles, her dreams, and her triumphs. One evening, after another performance that left the room in awe, the wealthy man approached her once more. He was no longer the challenging, boastful figure she had first encountered. Instead, there was a calm respect in his demeanor, a genuine admiration.
"Lily," he said, "you've grown so much."
"Your talent, your dedication, it's remarkable. You've made this place extraordinary, and more importantly, you've inspired people. I hope you know how special that is." His words made her heart swell. It wasn't about money or status or approval. It was about recognition for her courage and her passion. Lily smiled, feeling the weight of his words, but also understanding their deeper meaning. She realized that this journey had never been about impressing anyone, even him. It had been about discovering herself, embracing her talent, and finding the confidence to share it with the world. The applause, the attention, the opportunities, they were all wonderful. But the true reward was within her. The knowledge that she could rise to challenges, face her fears, and create something meaningful. The attention she received also brought new opportunities. Invitations arrived to perform at small concerts, community events, and even local music gatherings. People wanted to hear her play, to feel the emotion and honesty that flowed from her music. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to step outside the familiar walls of the restaurant. But each time she played, each time she faced the audience and let the music flow, she gained more confidence. She realized that her life could expand beyond her previous limitations, that her dreams were not only valid but achievable. Still, Lily made careful choices. She did not chase fame or wealth. She chose to perform in places that felt right, where the focus was on the music and the connection with people rather than on status or prestige. She wanted her talent to be meaningful, to touch hearts rather than simply impress. Her performances became not just entertainment but moments of shared humanity. People who came to hear her play often left changed, moved by the sincerity and depth of her music. They saw someone who had overcome fear, embraced her talent, and remained true to herself. A lesson more powerful than any applause or praise. At the restaurant, the dynamics had shifted as well. Guests no longer saw her as just a waitress. They recognized her as an artist, someone extraordinary in her own right. Even those who had initially doubted her now watched with admiration. Some approached her to express how moved they were, sharing personal stories of how her music had affected them. Each interaction reminded Lily that her gift had the power to bridge differences, to connect people who might otherwise never have felt a shared moment of understanding. But the most important change was internal. Lily's confidence had grown, and with it, her sense of self-worth. She had learned that talent and courage were inseparable, that taking risks and facing fear could open doors she had never imagined. Every time she performed, she was reminded that her life was hers to shape. She no longer felt limited by her job, her background, or the expectations of others. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a woman who had discovered her own power. The wealthy man, who had once been a symbol of challenge and judgment, became a mentor of sorts, offering guidance and encouragement without pressure. He respected her choices, her pace, and her vision. He suggested opportunities, introduced her to people in the music world, but always left the decision to her. Lily appreciated this balance. It allowed her to grow without feeling controlled or manipulated. She could explore her path, try new experiences, and still remain true to herself. As months passed, Lily's life continued to evolve. She remained at the restaurant, but her evenings were filled with music, connection, and creativity. Her reputation as a talented pianist spread, but she never let it define her entirely. She knew that her identity was built not only on her music, but also on her integrity, her hard work, and her willingness to embrace opportunities while